Hi everyone, thank you for being here for this new episode of Nepal Now, the podcast where we highlight different ideas and actions to move the country forward. I'm Marty Logan. A quick reminder that you can back the work that goes into creating this show by clicking on the white support button at the middle left of our homepage and making a contribution. If you have any questions or suggestions about this, or about the show in general, feedback on what you hear, an idea for an episode, or anything at all, you can write to me at martylogancoms, C-O-M-M-S, @gmail.com. If you're at least in your 20s, you've probably heard of Tootle. It was the first ride-sharing app to operate in Nepal, starting in 2016. Today, there's a multitude of competitors, from Pathao to InDriver, Bolt, and more. In this episode, Tootle's founder, Sixit Bhatta, tells us that he's happy to see how the marketplace has developed since his project to track a bus on its route evolved into one of the country's earliest forays into the so-called sharing economy. And he adds that he's moving on to new things. Hint, they're about as far away from Kathmandu's traffic jams as he can get, both literally and figuratively. But you have to wonder how things might have turned out if the government hadn't delivered a knockout blow to his new local business via a tax bill that today's ride-sharing ventures, backed by international resources, do not have to face. Sixit is surprisingly philosophical about this, preferring to focus on the ground that Tootle broke. That includes getting customers used to taking a lift from a motorcycle riding stranger and, for the drivers, losing the shame of accepting money for their work. I think you'll be surprised at his answer when I ask Sixit for one piece of advice he would give to entrepreneurs just starting out. I was. Please listen now to my chat with Sixit Bhatta. Sixit Bhatta, welcome to Nepal Now.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Marty. Good to see you after a while.
It has been a while. So we're definitely here to talk about your experience creating and managing the ride-sharing company, Tootle. But before we get there, I saw from your Instagram in the last little while that you've been on the road a lot lately, both here in Nepal and outside of Nepal. And I have this idea that entrepreneurs are always looking for the next opportunity. So I'm wondering, is that what you were doing, or were you just traveling?
Well, I don't travel to look at opportunities, but when I travel, I find a lot of opportunities. I can put it that way. So I was traveling in the far west. I was traveling in the plains and up to the remote mountains, and that gives a sense of perspective of how people live, or what are they missing out on. And it gives you a sense of what we can do to make their lives better, where you can come in as an individual. Of course, there are a few things that I've learned I can share during the course of this conversation, which are very interesting.
Right. Okay, that sounds very interesting. We'll get back to that. So on to Tootle. I want to hear about the entire Tootle journey, if I can put it that way, which I believe started in 2017. But first, for people who are wondering and maybe even thinking, I have to go out, but I can listen to this while I'm traveling, can they order a Tootle ride like right now, today? Is it available at the moment?
Not just yet on Tootle, but well, I'm very happy to learn that Nepal now has a lot of players in this space, including the multinational brands and the companies out of Silicon Valley. So not in Tootle, but you have so many other options to choose from. And as the founder of Tootle and as someone who started ride sharing in Nepal, I'm very happy to see that the lives of people have changed.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. It was 2017, as I said. And I believe at that time you had just returned or recently returned to Nepal from studying, or
no.
You had been here a while.
I've been in Nepal all through my life. Of course, okay. I've been traveling in and out, but my entire education has been here in Nepal, and I've never lived outside to To be honest, I began my career with a telecom company back in 2002, which is a while ago.
Okay.
Not that young.
I've got you beat, don't worry. What was the germ that got Tootle, or the seed that started Tootle growing?
Well, it was in 2016, in the aftermath of the earthquake, and after I had quit my job in the bank, after having worked for around 12, 13 years for a bank and a telco before that, I started a company where we were working on education software. But that didn't do too well, and the earthquake dismantled everything that we'd built, because we'd built it for the schools, and the schools after earthquake had different priorities. So we had our back against the wall. And I never thought of doing Tootle to begin with. I never thought of doing a ride sharing. But it came out of boredom, I'd say, where I, along with a couple of people in my team, I told them, hey, would it be a cool idea to kind of triangulate a location of a vehicle by using cell towers? Because that had been my experience. I worked for a telecom company as an RF engineer, and I knew that if we could use cell towers, even without having a GPS, you could find a location with certain accuracy of a mobile phone that could be placed in a vehicle. And it was around in 2016, 2015, so we didn't have as much of 4G and 3G back then. We didn't have all the payment infrastructure we do today, like PhonePe, etc., etc. We didn't have that before. So we kind of built up that technology, and the idea sprouted in our mind that we could potentially use that to track a Saja bus, right? Because Saja bus had just hit the road. And the idea was you could place a SIM card in a dongle or in a device, and that could be just put inside the Saja bus. And people in an app could see where the buses are going, and if the bus is coming along, you could just time your run to the bus stop. But that idea, again, grew into, if we could track a Saja bus, probably we could track a vehicle. And if you could track a vehicle, probably we could have an app where you could book a ride on a vehicle or a motorcycle. And that's how it evolved. I would not say Tootle came out of blue as a groundbreaking idea that we thought that, hey, we want to solve this problem. I think it was more of an evolutionary process, and it was something that we really loved doing at that point in time to bring out a change in the society and the lives of people around us. So it just happened, Human beings have something called narrative fallacy or hindsight bias. At the end of the day, we try to make a story out of the events that unfold in our lives. But to be very honest, what we did and what we were able to do was pure luck. I think we were at the right time, at the right place to begin this journey.
Okay. So then once you had decided to go ahead with what evolved, how difficult was it to actually get it on the road so that you hired your first riders and people and created the app? Obviously was a big part of it.
Look, when we start a new journey, the things that we learned to begin with was we always thought entrepreneurship is about solving a problem, right? But that not necessarily is true. Even if you solve a problem, it is not necessary that people would adopt that solution. I'll give you an example, right? The QWERTY keyboard that we use was in the first place built to make typing difficult. Right? Because we used to have typewriters, and the typewriters would jam because they would have some mechanical stuffs that could jam if you typed it very fast.
Yeah, I remember using them.
Right?
Yeah,
so it would jam. So what they did was they placed the most used letters on the far left-hand side. So if you see A, S, D, they're on the left-hand side. And most people were right-handed, so they had to reach out for that. But we adapted to that solution in a way that it became a standard. In the long run, people came out with improvements on QWERTY typewriter that could be more efficient, but no one actually adopted, and this still remains the gold standard. So the point that I'm trying to make is even if you find a solution to the problem, a more efficient solution, people are less likely to adopt. So going back to your question, I think the biggest challenge that we faced was changing human behavior, right? In Kathmandu, we never had a behavior of giving and taking a ride on a motorcycle because it was seen as something that was very new. It was difficult for people to trust someone hitching a ride with someone on a motorcycle, even though it was with an app where you had all the details of that individual. People would not trust them. Again, it came out of the biases because they would always go in a cab with a person that you don't trust either, right? So that trust issue was there, and people never believed that something of this kind could be used. On the other side, if you look at the bikers or the riders themselves, in Nepal we found that people didn't have dignity in work. They didn't want to be seen driving a bike to make an income. It was something to be ashamed of, even if it made a lot of income.
I had no idea that reaction. The first obstacle that you described makes sense, but that one I had no idea that you encountered that.
Yeah, so it was extremely difficult. Even if it made them quite a bit of income, they would not want to be seen giving a ride to someone, right? And at the end of the ride, they would be embarrassed to take cash. And they would be more embarrassed if it was a woman or a pretty girl behind their bike. So it was extremely difficult to change that mindset, that behavior, let alone the behavior of using an app for the very first time in Nepal, the behavior of using mobile payments, which never existed before in this particular type of business.
Okay, so then it sounds like it was a surprise to you also that this actually was a big obstacle. How did you tackle that then?
I don't think it was an obstacle. I think if you are an entrepreneur, and if you are the first mover, if you are changing the industry or if you're developing a new industry, I think these things are expected, right? And the course of action would be to tackle that, to have more volume. If there are more people using it, it becomes a standard, right? There's a kind of a friction for people to start a journey. We live in a sense of status quo. So as and when we picked up our rides, we picked up number of trips, we added more people into the network. That changed that behavior. And today it's absolutely brilliant to see that the kind of industry that we conceived around 7-8 years ago employs 200,000-300,000 people every day, which I think is wonderful in a city like Kathmandu and in a country like Nepal.
That's very quick, that growth.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes it didn't feel like it to you, but I mean, really, when you think back, the zero moment was 2017. Mm-hmm. To me, that seems very quick. And of course, now there are all of these different players, as you mentioned earlier. A lot was made in the media over the years after you started about these problems with the government, particularly about taxation, but I know also there were the taxi drivers and competition. How big a challenge was that for you? Was it all-consuming? Was it the one thing that kept you awake at night? Or was it just one of many things that came up as you were going ahead?
Well, look, I think there were a lot of challenges to begin with. I talked about the behavioral challenges. There were challenges with taxi drivers. There were challenges with the government. But I think the killer punch that we received as Tootle, as a domestic company, was the tax that was levied on us, which was huge for a startup that was just about to get into its feet. I did face court battles with the taxi unions. I did face battles with the government and the traffic police. But the tax that was slapped on us at that point in time was kind of a big punch. And it got us consumed into solving that tax problem for many years. Because when you have that problem, you'd not find investors. You'd have a lot of things to deal with for a company like ours, for a startup like ours. And if you were to compare the taxation, the way it was done, I think none of the companies today that are running today would be able to survive if they were taxed the way were taxed at that point in time. So it was very consuming, and it was a knockout punch, I would say, from the government.
Mm. Did you have any support from within the government? So maybe not at the top level, but were there any bureaucrats who were understanding?
Absolutely. Yeah. There were people. Look, when you come to the taxation and the policies that the government, most of the policies are designed by people who are in the grassroots, who are connected to individuals. But when you go to the ministry and in the policy levels, there are people who were understanding. There were people who were understanding enough that this is a new business and this would support. And it took us 3.5 years to solve that issue.
Do you feel in a way that you were penalized for being the first, almost?
Well, I think that's the part of the game. They say that early bird catches the worm, but it's the second mouse that eats the cheese. So I think that was the part of the game. And if you look at any new thing that has happened in this world, any army men or women that's in front in the battlefield, they have to be able to face the bullet, right? So I kind of enjoy, I cannot tell you I really thoroughly enjoyed when we were taxed, but I kind of felt that I could thrive in those situations. And it was a battle, and it helped us learn so many things. It helped me grow personally. And it was something that we faced that allowed this industry to grow to where it is today.
So today, a new entrant to the market, and there seem to be new ones coming quite regularly, is not taxed the same way that you were initially taxed.
If they were taxed the same way I was taxed, then none of these companies would survive.
Is it about the tax rate, or is it about the moment when you get taxed? Or
it's about the amount that was taxed on. So if you're paying 100 rupees on a bike ride, and if Tootle charges you 10 rupees out of that 100 rupees, you should be taxed on that 10 rupees, right? But we are charged in that entire 100 rupees. So
you were taxed on the 100
rupees. That was, and the entire, most of the part of that income was of the biker.
Right.
So
okay.
Yeah, but it's a thing of the past. So it's something that helped us learn and grow.
And so when you called it a knockout blow, is that why today, when I leave here, I'm not able to get a Tootle ride? Or is it more complicated than that?
Well, that's one of the reasons. But there are many other factors, right? If you look at the kind of policies, when we started, the kind of challenges that we faced for so many years. But today, I think the government has not really played a role in protecting local startups. But that's fine, I think. That's one of the reasons, of course.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that despite the difficulty, the pain even, I might say, of that experience, you also learned. So explain to me some of the things that you take away from the Tootle experience.
Well, there are many takeaways, and I think we've incorporated many of our takeaways as we progressed over the time. I think as an entrepreneur, the importance of doing your due diligence in a country like Nepal, right? Because we felt that we were doing a great job and everyone would support you. And we did find a lot of support from the media, from the civil society, but I was in a kind of a high where I felt that, wow, whatever I was doing was something that was saving the society, that was helping people move, and everyone would support you. Everyone would help you grow, and even if you would make trivial errors, people would forego and help you. But that's not the case. I think at one side of the spectrum, the society is altruistic, they would help you, but at the other end, the society is also ruthless. And the more you progress, the more you develop, the more you become successful, there is a very narrow line that you walk. that's one of the lessons that I learned.
Is that are those the official rules, or are we also talking about people using other ways to put you down because you're threatening to them in some way? So it's not that you need to read the rule book more closely; it's that you just need to understand your environment better.
Well, I'll give you an anecdote. In 2019, I was in The Hague, and I was taking a train journey from Hague to Amsterdam. So I bought a train card for $25, and I had punched it somewhere. And then I took a train with my bags. So the guy comes walking to me and asks me for a ticket. And when he puts that ticket onto his machine, he tells me that, if you've not punched the ticket, you've not punched the card. And I was embarrassed to myself that, hey, look, I tried to do it, but maybe it didn't work. But, I just bought €25 worth of the ticket in the kiosk there. And he said, okay, come with me. I knew that the fines for that would be €400, right? I said, hey, I have a card. I'm here from Nepal. And I was in this invitation. He didn't speak to me much, but he asked me to follow him in the next station. So with the luggage, I was following him, and he took me outside. And while he was checking me out of the gate, he used his card to open the gate. And he told me, now you punch your card and come inside. And I asked him, why did you do that? He said that if you had not punched it at the station that you boarded, which was in Den Haag, you would not be able to get outside in Amsterdam. So I had to make sure that you punched in. He took me up to the platform, and he got me to another train and said, this train is going to the same direction. I told him, I broke the rules. Why didn't you penalize me? And what he told me was, we don't know one another, but I certainly know that you're not from here. And my duty here is not to penalize you, but to help you. I could have penalized you, but we're here to help one another, right? And when I came back to Nepal, it was a similar situation. Everyone you have in the authority, whether it's the traffic police or the government officers, there are rule books that everyone follows. But one needs to make a judgment like the officer in that train, whether you penalize that individual or not. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Although you're Nepali in Nepal, you're still new to that whole milieu of doing business.
Yeah. And this is a true story, by the way.
Yeah, that's a very telling story for sure. We've touched on these challenges. Let's flip it and let me ask you, what do you think has been and you also mentioned a few of these, but what would you say has been the biggest accomplishment of Tootle?
I think to establish this industry, create jobs. Look, innovation is a continuous process, right? When Wright brothers created plane, that plane is not the one that flies you transatlantic today. But you remember Wright brothers, right? You don't remember who started Boeing. You don't remember the CEO of Airbus or any other company. So, despite the challenges we faced, I think we started our industry. And today, even though this market is commoditized with so many players in, it's seen improvements. It's seen improvements in safety. It's seen improvement in behavior. It's seen improvement in so many other aspects. And I would like to congratulate the companies that came after us. Right? If I was only there, then I would have stopped, probably maybe used a certain policy framework or lobbied with the government to stop other players. Maybe would not have seen this growth in the industry. So I think I must congratulate other players who have bettered us. We've improved what we did. We put up a spark in creating an industry, but it was up to other companies to take the baton forward. And tomorrow this industry would evolve in a different way. I think that's a great accomplishment for me to having started this industry, to be at the forefront of this journey that I think is something that I look back with a lot of pride.
Do any of these new players come to you for advice or do you have contact with them?
No, I don't really have contact because I think as an entrepreneur I need to look out for other different opportunities, and I think just the way we've changed this industry, there are other places where I need to now focus on, and I'm really excited about what I'm thinking of doing.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about that? At least, so I'm assuming.
Well, I want to be a farmer, I would say, or I'd say farmpreneur.
Okay, so
what's
a farmpreneur then?
Well, look, I think agriculture today. I think agriculture is the biggest technological invention or innovation that humankind has ever seen 10,000 years ago. And today we live at a time where we need to feed more with less land for food security and the kind of climate change we face. I think that can only happen if we can introduce right technologies, cutting-edge stuff. And this is something that really excites me.
And you would be, I think, rare in Nepal. There are some people, but certainly in a minority, among people who want to go into farming, because as we all know, we keep hearing about the villages emptying and the land being left fallow, etc., etc.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity for people listening. This year is the year of millets. Millet is abundant in Nepali mountains, but somehow we've given up having millets. Millet is a superfood. It consumes way less water than rice and wheat, and you can have multiple crop cycles per one rice crop cycle. Millet provides a big agricultural opportunity, and this is something that has been seen today from the Western world and even in India as a crop that could enable solving food security. So anyone listening on agriculture in this particular program, I would encourage you to look into millets, and that is something that is very, very interesting also.
I was reading an article recently about millet in Africa, where they're using one particular strain that uses far less water than others even. Because exactly as you said, in these drought situations, you're unable to grow these so-called export crops like wheats and corn and that kind of thing.
And the other advantage millet would serve in mountains of Nepal is the migration problem, because it requires very less maintenance, right? It does not require as much hard work as it would for rice, which means that it will require a lot less human resources, which means barren lands in the mountains could be effectively utilized for farming millets, and they would receive a huge value.
You posted a photo on Twitter of an ancestral home.
I did, and I also
on Instagram. On Instagram.
Yeah, but I also posted a photo of a millet pancake in my Twitter.
Hey, I didn't see that one.
I did. I tried a lot of stuff on millets. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I'll be looking for anything you're posting about millets, because it sounds like you could be going in that direction.
Yeah, but technology would play a huge role, and when I say technology, it will be cutting edge technology.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds very interesting. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, again, maybe like you were back then, doesn't have any experience in business and wants to do what they believe is something new? What would you tell them to not forget to do? Is it to get to know the regulators? Is it to better know your potential customer base? What is the...
Well, for me, entrepreneurship, when I started Journey of Tootle, I never looked into what market I was serving. I never did my maths in terms of the size of the market or the growth of the market. Because for me, it was a kind of an expression, right? I feel entrepreneurship is more like an art. And from day one, I've been maintaining that fact that entrepreneurship is an art for me. it gets mundane when it becomes a business and a day-to-day affair. So if Tootle was operating today, I would be doing a day-to-day stuff, which would not excite me. So I think it is my perspective, so I'm no one to be giving a suggestion based on my own perspective and how I see entrepreneurship, but I think take it as an art. Take it as an art. And when you take it as an art, you find satisfaction and happiness on small improvements you make, just like painting a picture. Right? And when you take it as an art, it's always a work on progress. You can be a little philosophical about it. I can quote Robert Pirsig from his book Zen and the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance, if you've read this one. In one of the lines he says, the Zen that you see at the top of the mountain is the Zen that you carry with you. So I would suggest take it as an art. Then you would find happiness and satisfaction on small improvements. So that's my advice, if you may take it.
No, I love the sound of that. It sounds great, and personally it appeals to me. But certainly you're not saying don't keep an eye on the bottom line. Because especially as you're starting out, you usually don't have a huge bank behind you.
Those things are important, so you need to have a partner who looks into that bottom line. But for someone who can be creative, be as creative as you can. But also have someone who can put you grounded and run you by the numbers. That's the problem with artists.
Yeah, they say you have to suffer to be an artist, right?
Yeah. I've suffered enough to become an entrepreneur, so that's why it's as close to art for me than it is to business.
Okay, great. That's a very interesting place, I think, to end this conversation. It was really nice to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you for having me here, and I look forward to catching up again.
I look forward to watching what you'll do next.
Yeah, it might take some time, but I'll be happy to share.
Okay, great. Thanks again.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks again to Sixit Bhatta for sharing his story with me today. If you have any feedback on this episode, please share it on our socials, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And before I say goodbye, a reminder to like, follow, or favorite the show wherever you're listening now. Thanks as always to technician Dinesh and everyone here at Radio Ujalo for the recording space. I'm Marty Logan. I produce Nepal Now, and I'll talk to you again soon.